Good morning, conversation 2. It is Sunday. Tomorrow our midterm exams will begin, so this is going to be a really short overview of what is expected, okay? So this is not a regular lesson. This is just sort of a recap of what we talked about earlier this week in our Zoom lectures. There's lots of things, as I said, to think about, but the best advice I can give you going into it is to prepare for the topics properly. The best advice is, first of all, to relax and be confident and be prepared, because you don't want to give a good impression. There's only 2 questions I'm going to ask you. As I said, you have no choice. You have no control over which questions are asked. I'm just going to pick them completely randomly, student by student. So you will get one of these questions, one of these 5, and then you'll get another one. It might be question 5 first and then question 2 second. It doesn't really matter. You just have to handle the question as they come. The good thing is all of you know the topics, and I've explained them to you in detail over the last 2 months. So there's no excuse for not being prepared. Obviously, my biggest concern is that despite my warnings that you try to memorize or read your answer, and even though you're not right in front of me and I can't see your environment completely, I am going to ask that you have your camera on and that you don't wear a hat and that you make eye contact with the camera so that I can tell that you're responding to the questions in real time without any assistance from a piece of paper or a screen or anything like that. If you choose to do that, I will easily notice what you're doing. Your mannerisms are not really easy to control, even though I'm a professor and I've done many interviews and many presentations and I do lectures all the time. You would be able to tell if I started reading. I could put it right behind the screen, but my eyes would still be tracking. So that's your only warning. If you do get caught, that's cheating, and the grade you get will reflect that. So let's get into the questions. I hope all of you sleep well and are prepared for your exam. As I explained earlier, we're doing batches of 10 or 12 students, so tomorrow will be the first groups, and then Tuesday, and then a week later, the younger students will do their interviews too. It's your privilege as an older student to go first and get your midterm done, because that's a good feeling. The freedom is nice, and you get it earlier than the younger students. So I'm being generous to you older students. Remember that. This is a set of questions I'm going to ask. The first question, as I explained, I think it's a very simple one. You just have to choose a language that you're interested in and tell me why. You're allowed to choose a type of English dialect. I said don't go so narrow as to choose like a New York accent or a Californian accent, but American English as a type of English, British, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand, whatever, South African, those are all distinct types of English with a set of different vocabulary, and sometimes even, beyond expressions and everything, the pronunciation is different and so on. So don't narrow down to a specific city or region of the United States, but American English is a choice you're allowed to make. Otherwise, just go with a language. Lots of people chose different ones. The only restriction is you can't choose your own language. So if you're Korean, you can't choose Hangul. And likewise, if you're Chinese or from another country, Asia or otherwise, that's not allowed. If you're from Germany, you can't choose German. Okay, and that will be obvious, I think, by your accent and how you speak English, that you're from a certain place, just like me. I'm Canadian. Okay, so Canadian English is not allowed if I were taking the exam. Your opinion about fashion. I said you can kind of do this as like a personal answer, or you can do sort of a big picture thing. You can talk about fashion trends, micro trends, seasonal trends. You can talk about the environmental impact of the fashion industry. You can talk about the fact that you like shopping and it's stress relief, or in like me, that you don't like shopping and it's stressful to try and find something that looks good and doesn't cost too much. It's your decision, but choose something. Don't just ramble as your professor sometimes does. You only have 2 minutes, so just focus on one aspect of fashion and talk about that and say what your opinion is about it, and then your question is done. Like I said, 90 seconds, 2 minutes is fine. If you go over that a little bit, no problem. I'm just mostly concerned that people would have a 30-second answer or a 15-second answer. That's much too short. And if you take 5 minutes to answer one question, then you can't get through the proper number. So 4 minutes is much too long. 30 seconds is much too short. Somewhere around 2 minutes is ideal. Next, we did the chapter about life. And in the chapter, remember, it doesn't match as well as some of the other topics. It's sort of talking about family mostly, and relationships, but which you're allowed to talk about. But what the question was choose your priority. I'm looking for one. Remember, some students chose 2 or 3 or a list of 5. And my point earlier this week was, if you choose 5 things, you end up just making a list and not describing any of the priorities and why you chose them. But I'm interested in the reasons why that's your priority, and also how your lifestyle matches or doesn't match it. So we talked about this in the Zoom lecture, and if you missed it or you weren't listening carefully, once again, you have to choose a priority. You have to give some reasons why you made that choice, and you have to sort of talk about your behavior and what you do in order to make that priority, have an effect on your life, a positive effect. Or if you have not successfully done that so far, how you would like to. Okay, number 4, really broad topic. You can talk about your story or somebody else's. It can be from anywhere, but I mentioned again, the length of the story is important. There has to be a beginning and a middle and an end, because it has to be a story. It's probably best if you choose something from your own life, which you think is an interesting story, and tell me about it. Something that is probably an episode or a moment, or like one day, or even a shorter thing, an event that happened in your life is probably easier to manage than talking about, a bigger thing. As I mentioned, I think in the lecture or the video lecture or the Zoom lecture, basically, you just can't choose something like World War II and try and spin that into a story in 2 minutes. It just is not possible. So you've got to pick something that has an appropriate length. Otherwise, it's up to you what you want to say. Okay? Last one is number 5, and I just went through these this week. Some students have said, "Hey, professor, did you check my email?" Yes. I don't know. There is a setting on your email that says I've looked at it or I haven't. I have it too, and I've looked at every single person's paper. So if that setting hasn't notified you that I've seen it, I have seen it. If it says I haven't, it's possible that you sent it to the wrong email address, or your student number wasn't written down correctly. So you can check that, and that might be the reason. Otherwise, I have seen all of them. And one student in particular talked about specific objects that were in the room and how the student's memories were attached to the objects. And I pointed out, it's possible that something like that would make you feel differently about a home. But remember, the specific topic is to describe a home. And you can remove everything from inside a home, Obviously, when you put furniture and you decorate it, everything, you make it feel like home. If you've ever moved from one house to another, you look at a bare apartment and it feels like it's not yours until you actually move your stuff in there. But I just don't want you to focus on the stuff so much as the home in general. So if you're zeroing in to your favorite chair or an object that you were given that you keep in your room, something like a jewelry box or something like that, you're not quite on topic anymore because you're focusing on the jewelry box, not really the home. So it's usually a combination of things. Just because you put the jewelry box in your room doesn't make it feel like your home by itself, I wouldn't think. And if it does, I suppose I'm going to have to allow it. But for the most part, the things that make you feel that something is a home is a combination of things, right? The environment outside. I live on the first floor and the sun comes through the window and there's trees and I have a garden by my window and I can look out and see people playing in the playground. It makes me feel like I'm in a house, which reminds me of when I was young and I did live in a house. I've never lived in an apartment building on a different floor than the first one, so I don't know what I would feel like, but something tells me that 25th floor would not feel as comfortable for me. I like being close to the ground. These are the kind of things that go into something being a home. So if you can explain how certain things in your house, the furniture arrangement or certain objects contribute to that feeling of home, good. But if you're just talking about those objects and how they make you feel connected to your childhood or something like that, or an event in your life, you're not really staying on topic. Okay? So just be aware of that for all of the things. I do like you to be specific, so I didn't want anybody to be confused about that. Just remember, the focus should be on the home, not necessarily certain objects that are in your home or your room. It's more like a feeling that you get, like I said, with a combination of things. So as long as those objects go together and create this feeling of home, if they do, then you're fine. Okay? So I hope that explains the topics well. Everybody has had a chance to talk in Zoom, and I do recommend over the next week or so that you do talk to your phone or your camera like I do and watch yourself or listen to yourself, because there's no substitute for actually practicing, right? You might be surprised and you might not like the sound of your own voice. I certainly have gotten used to hearing myself after all of these video lectures for the last year, but at first it was not my favorite thing, is to listen to myself struggle through a video lecture every week, every few days, right? So I've gotten better. If you look back on my YouTube channel, you'll see some pretty horrible lectures. I don't mind saying that because I was learning how to be natural in front of the camera, and I still have things to improve. So the same thing goes for you. Practice and you'll do better. The midterm is meant to be a bit of a warm-up for the exam because the exam has more questions, it's longer, and it's worth more. So 15% of your grade goes into the midterm. If it doesn't go well, you learn from it and apply the things that you learned and try to improve the rest of the semester. That's how it goes. Okay? So everybody, good luck, and I will see you individually. Make sure you're not late 10 minutes before your time. The schedule is clearly linked on the website, so there's no excuse. I will see you tomorrow and in the following week. Take care, everybody. Have a good, enjoy the rest of your weekend. I know it's tempting to go outside and enjoy the beautiful weather, but make sure you do study and get a good rest tonight. See you next week.